Ladies and gentlemen, very special show today here on the Pete Overzet YouTube channel. We are taking a break from our club top shots. Okay, don't worry, we will get back to those soon. Today we have to get into the serious side of sports gambling and speculating on things in DFS, which is taxes. So I've been famously on all of these shows saying I am not a financial advisor. And today I decided to bring on an actual accountant and an actual CPA. It's Peter Kwon. He focuses on DFS tax planning. Peter's going to walk us through how to get our houses in order before taxes are due. So Peter, thank you for joining me today.
Thanks, Peter. I appreciate the introduction. Sorry for all the viewers. I'm not a Damian Lee or Brian Scalabrine for that matter, but you know, like Peter said, taxes are important. So here to offer up some guidance and navigate DFS tax return filing. So
yeah, and right off the top, I will say, first of all, we have his Twitter right there. You can see on the screen at Daily Fantasy CPA. He's a very fun follow on Twitter and will help you out too if you guys have questions. And then on top of that, he has a course. The link is down below. This is an in-depth course. I went through it the other day. It has all kinds of more in the weeds information that we might not be able to get to today on how to file your different filing options. It's what would you say, about a 45-minute PowerPoint?
Oh yeah, it's a 40-minute MP4 file, and it'll pretty much walk any daily fantasy sports player through their tax return, the Schedule C trader business filing, and or if you wanted to treat that daily fantasy sports income as gambling as well. So it'll pretty much walk you through the tax filing, especially if you are planning to self-file on your own.
Yeah. And so today we're also going to use, my big news is you guys who have been following me from DFS know this was my first winning profitable season in DFS. I finally got my 1099 miscellaneous from DraftKings. So we can use that as a bit of an example today. But why don't you let people know kind of your background too? How did you find yourself at the intersection of being a CPA, but also in the DFS world?
Sure. So, well, first of all, a huge fan. I've been checking out a couple of your shows, and I think that you, Jack Settleman, Peter Jennings, you guys have been absolutely killing it. I don't have a funny costume or a baby with me, but I do have some of my tax expertise that I'd happily share on your behalf.
Awesome. Yeah, and you've had some nice winning seasons of DFS yourself.
Oh yeah. So I actually created this Twitter account a couple of months ago because in 2019 I did profiteer a little bit. I made around $110,000 in net DFS profits in 2019 and around $13,000 in 2020. And it came to my attention that it was very difficult to navigate your tax filing. And there were so many different ways to treat your daily fantasy sports income. And so after hours and hours and hours of research, I wanted to share what I found and pretty much help the average daily fantasy sports player save, a ton in taxes. And,
so
here to help.
I'm completely a noob with all of this. My taxes pre-DFS had been, pretty easy to file. So now we have a little complexity here. And one of the things that we're going to talk about today are the different options you have, because it's not just as simple as filing it as miscellaneous income. So we're going to go through what some of those options are. Obviously, everyone's kind of situation is unique. And that's kind of what the course can also help you out with if you have specifics on exactly how to file. Today, we're going to try to keep it a little more high level, just get you the information you need to know and point you in the right direction of some other resources. But why don't we just start in the most basic way possible as far as instead of win packs, it's win tax here, Peter. So everyone knows about the April 15th filing day. Last year was kind of thrown off with coronavirus. Is there kind of any dates on the calendar we need to keep our eye out for here?
Yeah, so April 15th is the filing deadline for the individual return, the 1040 return. But you can file an extension form, which would grant you until October 15th to file the return. If you owed any tax payment on the return, tax itself would still be due in April, but just an option, for anyone that did need that additional time to gather up their paperwork.
Awesome. And I will just give someone a little bit of advice for me. So this is my first time getting one. I was waiting for one to come in the mail. It didn't ever come in the mail. And then on top of that, normally the sites that I get tax forms from, they give me a little email nudge. Hey, your tax form's ready. I never got that. So I'm sitting here waiting. I finally did find it buried within my DraftKings account. There is a document tab. So if you're uncertain about whether you have one, you can go and check there. Pete, do you have any other tips for, I didn't get one on FanDuel. Is it kind of a similar process over there?
Yeah, so FanDuel mailed out their 1099 miscs. And honestly, I'm surprised that, it took you so long to track down your 1099, man. Are you sure you got one? You sure you're not lying to your audience?
You know what? Let me share just so I can prove that I am not a fraud here. I had to screenshot it so you don't get all my address, but here it is. My 2020, I had 8.8 K roughly here of miscellaneous income here from DraftKings. Is there anything else on this 1099 that is relevant other than that number, other income?
No, not really. That other income is your net profit. And so that actually factors in, your gross, your winnings and your entry fees. And so pretty much DraftKings did all the work for you in terms of the amount of net profit that you had for the January 1, 2020 to December 31st, 2020 tax year. And I think the first question that jumps into mind is, how many Top Shot moments did you buy with that?
See, that's the thing. And, I put the question out on Twitter today, hey, some DFS tax questions. And basically half of them were like, let's talk Top Shot tax, because the DFS tax, setup is already kind of streamlined. We know how it works. Top Shot's this wild, wild west. We are going to talk a little bit about Top Shot tax stuff later. But yes, to answer your question, I have definitely spent some of my DFS winnings on Top Shot. I just rolled it right on over, Peter.
I love it.
So let's, I think one of the questions that I see the most, and I'm curious if you agree, is this whole idea of, can you write off losses on one site versus winnings on another? Basically, how does the overall pool of your, gambling miscellaneous income, can it be reconciled together?
Yes. So absolutely, you can offset daily fantasy sports related income from FanDuel to that of DraftKings. Unfortunately, you don't receive a tax form for a loss, so it is up to you as a taxpayer to keep a detailed record of your loss. But absolutely, you can deduct FanDuel loss from your DraftKings winnings.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
And also too, I realize, get a little ahead of myself, just so people know, will I be receiving these or should I receive one? It's if you have over $600 in DFS profit, correct?
Correct. So first of all, if you've received a 1099, congratulations, you made money. FanDuel and DraftKings issue out these 1099s to you by January 31st, but usually DraftKings and FanDuel, get an extension of time from the IRS. And so most people end up tending to get these tax forms by late February. Basically, this is your net profit on the year, and net profit is defined as prizes won minus entry fees plus bonuses. In a nutshell, if you have $599 or less in daily fantasy sports income, technically this is still taxable, but the IRS will not be, issuing out a 1099 form.
I did see a couple of replies to my tweet too. People seem a little upset with how slow DraftKings is getting out these 1099s.
Oh yeah, they're. I feel like every single year, I have high hopes of receiving this form, early February, but I feel like it always drags on, and here we are, on March 1st with the vast majority of players having finally received their tax forms.
So, I'm going to throw to you to see kind of which direction you think we should take it. I feel like there's kind of a couple different avenues. You have people who hire an accountant to do their taxes. You have people that might do their own on TurboTax and stuff. Are there any considerations people need to make, whether you're giving information to a CPA on how to handle it versus using, a turnkey software solution for it?
Yeah, so I guess the first thing that you have to make a determination of is whether or not you're planning to treat your daily fantasy sports income as a hobby or as a trader business. So a quick little summary. A hobby is, per the IRS, defined as an activity done mainly for sport, recreation, and pleasure. So if you're playing daily fantasy sports every other week or every other month, you really don't have a choice as to how to report that daily fantasy sports income. You have to treat it as a hobby, which is essentially gambling income. You have to report your daily fantasy sports income as line 8 other income on your 2020 tax return. Now, if you're playing daily fantasy sports regularly and for profit, and your intent is to make money, your livelihood depends on it. By the IRS's definition, your daily fantasy sports winnings can be treated as a trade or business. What this does is it allows you to deduct for expenses related to the production of income from daily fantasy sports winnings. This is a portion of expenses used to carry on the business, such as TV, laptops, utilities, phone bills, any subscriptions.
What about standing desks?
Oh, standing desks. Absolutely. Do you have one right there?
Yeah, I'm maneuvering my new standing desk there.
Dang, I see where that 1099 income went.
That's right. No, so I do feel like I read this in your course and you go into more detail.
Mm-hmm.
I felt like I was like a fringe case because I do consider myself a recreational player. Like the volume I was playing this year with NFL, I mean, I was taking it very seriously. I was a profitable player. I was almost treating it like a part-time job.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm having a hard time, like, I play NFL, let's say, as a for-profit player, but say I'm messing around and throw a few lineups in NBA contests because I don't play that much. Like, how do you reconcile to figure out, are you playing for profit or as a hobby?
So you're one of those tricky situations in which it could go either way. It sounds like you're making enough money to to treat your daily fantasy sports as a trader business, but it also sounds like you might be more of a casual player, and that if that's the case, you would be treating your daily fantasy sports income as other income or gambling. So you're actually right in the middle. It could go both ways for you. And so if you wanted to pay the least amount of tax, you would probably assume the Schedule C treatment.
Gotcha. And so how I assume most people, if they are on the fence with that one, that they gravitate towards the Schedule C, just if it's more advantageous for lowering your tax bill?
Oh, for sure. So you're deducting for all kinds of expenses that you wouldn't be able to deduct if you were treating your daily fantasy sports income as gambling. So kind of alluding to what I said earlier, just, now you can deduct for, your TV, laptops, utilities, subscriptions to, Osmo, RotoWire, RotoGrinder, Fantasy Cruncher, all that. And also if you had more of a loss, if you're treating your daily fantasy sports income as Schedule C, well, now you can take a good chunk of that loss and offset it with your W-2 income, which you couldn't do if you were treating your daily fantasy sports income as gambling.
Gotcha. So then what are the use cases of someone who receives a 1099? I just feel like this is hard to untangle because everyone plays under the pretense of like, I want to be a winning player. I want to try hard. No one is like, if people wanted to go play roulette, like they'd go play roulette, they view it as a game of skill. So what would be the use case of someone that's like, yeah, I made all this money, but I am just filing it as gambling income? I guess I'm just trying to figure out, why would anyone not file it as the Schedule C?
I think, unfortunately, most people just aren't aware that, this daily fantasy sports income can be treated this way. Plain and simple. When I made, a good chunk of money in 2019, I kind of ran my question to a bunch of other CPAs, and most people kind of laughed at me. They didn't know what daily fantasy sports were. And they didn't know that I made, a substantial amount of money back in 2019 playing it. And so I think with year in and year out, I've started corroborating some of this information with other like-minded CPAs, and it's definitely a good grounds to treat daily fantasy sports income as a Schedule C trader business. So
Gotcha.
unfortunately, I think a lot of people just aren't familiar with this type of treatment.
Yeah.
But if you're on the fence, kind of like yourself, I would highly advise you, if you're playing regularly and for profit, to treat your daily fantasy sports income as a trader business. It's
Gotcha.
a little bit of an aggressive tax position, but I think one that has complete merit. This is exactly how I filed my return in 2019 and how I'm planning to file in 2020 as well.
And that's one of the things that you have in your course. That link, like I said, is down below. You kind of go in depth with the specific forms and the kind of things that you need to have available to fill out that. And so you guys can check that out if you are interested in filing as a Schedule C. Because I have an accountant that does my taxes, and I am a little nervous about how I am going to, one, this year explain DFS, two, next year explain Top Shot. Let's just happen to say he's a bit of a boomer. What are the best ways that I can kind of convey what's going on here and get him all the information he needs to do this properly?
Well, this is where I self-promote, I guess, right here, and tell them, send that tax presentation that I created and have them take a look. But at the end of the day, it's not just me as a lone CPA, going rogue and treating daily fantasy sports income as a trader business. I've definitely corroborated this information with tons of other people out there and other CPAs as well who totally agree. But at the end of the day, you just need to find a CPA that will be on board with treating this daily fantasy sports income as trader business. Now, if you're playing regularly and for profit, in the eyes of the IRS, that constitutes a business. That in good faith, that's you're in the trader business of daily fantasy sports. It's tough. I don't think anyone can argue against this type of treatment.
Have you heard, just in general, like, have there been any horror stories with, DFS audits or things with this? I assume that you've had lots of people file as Schedule C with no issue.
Yeah. So as of right now, not too many issues that I'm aware of. I think the IRS has been pretty backed up in terms of number of returns that they need to review in a short amount of time. But for the most part, haven't run into too many issues. And to be quite honest, most of the self-filers reporting daily fantasy sports income are pretty small, immaterial, and it's almost not worth it for the IRS to look into any further.
Gotcha.
But no, not too many problems, and unless I have worked with a couple people that have told me that they kind of royally messed up, took way too much in deductions than was anticipated, and just they kind of ran into an issue there. But for the most part, if you're playing regularly and for profit, you have definitely a strong foundation to report your daily fantasy sports income as a trader business.
Gotcha. And then kind of the flip side of, if you are using a site like TurboTax to file your DFS winnings, are there any kind of special considerations people should be looking out for if they're doing it that way?
Oh, definitely to do your research, right? So, at the end of the day, you need to be deducting for expenses that are ordinary and necessary for your trader business of daily fantasy sports. I've heard of horror stories in which people are like, oh, I'll go ahead and deduct my car, and I'm sitting there like, no, that's a huge red flag. Where would you need your car to drive to play daily fantasy sports?
It'd be the people driving across the border in Vegas to get to to California to submit.
That's how you get audited really quickly. Yeah. I would strongly advise anyone, don't do that.
There you go. Do not put your car on there. Excuse me, sir. It says you have a toaster oven in here. Well, I make a nice toast with a little marmalade before I make all my lineups, sir. Okay. There you go. Well, speaking of dumb questions, a lot of people ask about what are the things you can write off. I mean, we just found out, don't write off your car expenses. What about me, going back to my usual case? Like, I have bought a hard hat for a bit about hand building my lineups, Pete. I mean, can I write off that hard hat for Amazon as part of my DFS winnings?
Geez, it really depends on whether or not you're making money off of your daily fantasy sports videos, and if you are treating that video income as a trader business. So in essence, if you are reporting your income from these videos as a trader business, by all means, report that hard hat, report that purple wig that you bought.
That's right.
People don't forget.
What about, so I do get freelance income for my videos. Like I made videos for Roto Grinders this year. I file that as freelance income. But would that be a shift though, if I were to, like, in that case, I wouldn't be able to write it off versus if it was the Schedule C?
No, you could write it off. It's just mostly gambling income in which we couldn't deduct for random miscellaneous expenses. But
Gotcha.
if you were reporting, income from different streams of revenue, yes, we could deduct for that on our page 1 of our 1040 return.
I do love that. I'm probably the only person in the world that would ask an accountant, can I write off an Amazon hard hat for my DFS winning? So I'm just glad we could all be a part of this momentous occasion.
I'm not going to lie. I've been in the industry, as a CPA for a couple years now. I guess around 7 years to be exact, but I've never received that question. So you're absolutely the first person to have ever asked if, we could deduct for an Amazon hard hat.
Well, you navigated it like a pro. So one other thing you mentioned in your course, and it kind of made me think here, okay, I need to be very intentional about how I file here versus filing it as gambling income. And then I were to switch it next year to, the Schedule C. You talked about the importance of continuity. Could you kind of explain why that's so important?
Oh, absolutely. So continuity is pretty important when it comes to treating your daily fantasy sports income a certain way, because you can't change your position from year to year and how you treat your income to pay the least amount of tax. That's tax evasion, which is illegal. If you didn't know about Schedule C treatment initially and you filed it as gambling, it's not a problem that you file it as a trader business in the next year, but keep in mind that you can't switch back and forth from year to year to pay the least amount of tax. You want to be as consistent as possible.
So what you're saying is, even though there might be in certain situations a good reason to have to switch back and forth, it still just looks very suspicious to the IRS if you're flopping it back and forth.
You got it.
All right.
You sure you're not an accountant in another life?
Hey, I took your course, man. And now I feel like, well, this is honestly it, Pete, because I knew I'm going to have to go to the guy who does my taxes and explain some of this stuff. And I'm like, I already feel like an idiot when I talk to him about this stuff. So I'm like, I need to actually know what I'm asking him with the correct terminology. So your course helped me feel better about not making a fool of myself in that regard.
Yeah, no, at the end of the day, I'd send that course over to your accountant and just say, hey, can we get on board with treating my daily fantasy sports income as a trader business? We can take all kinds of deductions related to the production of that income, if so.
Awesome. So I have some questions that I wanted to pass along, and then we will get to Top Shot. If you are tuning in right now for Top Shot, we will get to Top Shot. I'll also down below, I will put the timestamps. And we won't be offended. You can skip ahead to Top Shot talk. But this is still I got some questions on Twitter, in the Discord. Also plug the Discord here. I don't plug it to the Top Shot people because they all come in and ruin the Discord like crazy people. But if you're a DFS person and you want to get in the Discord, the link is down below. So here was one question. If someone already has an LLC for their business, in this case, it was a law practice where they're the sole employee, can they run the DraftKings other income through that on a schedule, or should I/they consider a separate LLC?
Well, in theory, you could, but there's really no reason to do so. If your law practice were to ever get sued for negligence or malpractice, well, then your DFS income is kind of in danger as well. As I alluded to earlier, you don't really need a separate LLC to file daily fantasy sports income as a trader business, there's no reason not to just file your daily fantasy sports income as a separate Schedule C from your law practice on your 1040 return.
So basically kind of what you're saying, like separate LLC opens up this entire new can of worms, and Schedule C kind of can accomplish something similarly with a lot less rigmarole.
Yeah, so you just don't want to report your daily fantasy sports income with your law firm income in case, there was some sort of legal backlash or some sort of lawsuit. So you can report that same amount of income just on a separate, Schedule C tax form.
Yeah. Okay, let's keep going through these questions. Some of these might kind of overlap with things we've already hit on, but I did appreciate people giving these. And I know for me, sometimes the repetition, seeing it from a different angle can help kind of crystallize what we need to be doing here. So someone asked, is the amount listed on the DraftKings 1099 overall profit, or have losses not been subtracted? If not, what's the best way to do that on TurboTax? I'd also like to know examples of deductions you can use. So these are all things we've kind of touched on, but maybe you can give some specific responses here.
Yeah, so 1099 misc from DraftKings and FanDuel is already net profit, which factors in loss. So, if you're treating that daily fantasy sports income as a hobby, you just go to your page 1, line 8 of your other income and just plop that, in your situation, $8,817 of income there. If you're treating it as a Schedule C trader business, you would be plopping that $8,817 on our Schedule C Part 1, Line 1, which is gross receipts or sales. Now, if you're, once again, treating this as trader business, you have all kinds of expenses and deductions that you can take, such as, a portion of expenses related to, any laptop costs, TVs, phones, utilities, which include electricity and cable, and subscriptions to your favorite tout site, all deductible expenses that allow you to generate this income from this daily fantasy sports.
This is a dumb question, which I'm good at asking, but do you have recommendations for, like, I've tried to get better now that I am doing lots of freelance stuff. I even have some people I'm paying for like contract labor with things. I try to keep my own spreadsheets just to kind of log it. Do you have any tips for people of kind of like the best ways to kind of keep track of things you might be able to deduct later?
Oh, definitely. So I keep track of everything. I urge everyone to keep track of everything in Excel, right? And at the end of the day, you can kind of sit with your accountant closer to tax time, and between the two, you guys can figure out what is and isn't deductible. And so, as long as you have some sort of record, hopefully in Excel, that shouldn't be a problem to kind of bifurcate what is deductible from what isn't, and to go from there.
Yeah, that's definitely helped me out, just to sometimes it can feel a little tedious and cumbersome when you have all these random little things, like if I am filing hard hat, but I think it definitely comes in handy and makes it easy, like you said, when you are kind of sitting down with your accountant. Here's a funny question from my guy, Jason. He says, if you never received a 1099 from DraftKings, does it mean you're tax exempt or just a straight up loser?
Whew. Well, tax exempt refers to income or transactions that are free from tax. Technically, even $1 of daily fantasy sports income is supposed to be reported to the IRS. To answer Jason's question, if you have under $600 in net profit, you may not receive a tax form. And so, in theory, you might not receive a tax form, but you also might not be a loser. You might have still actually made money if you had $599 or less in income. But more likely than not, you might have lost money on the year.
Yeah, and I'm trying to, the one site I'm familiar with, not affiliated with them at all. I think RotoTracker can do a pretty good job.
Oh, yeah.
Is there any other tools that you know of where people can really kind of figure out, hey, this is how much I had in play and this is how much I lost in the given year? Because otherwise it's really just getting the 1099 that tells you that. Yeah.
So, you can export your CSV history from FanDuel and DraftKings at any time. But, once you play more regularly and with thousands and thousands of dollars on the day, it starts getting tedious compiling all those CSV reports. Now, a lot of people, I think what they don't realize is, if you're playing with just insane amount of volume, compared to the average user, most of the times you get some sort of personal rep on FanDuel or DraftKings. And, I've heard of instances in which people will just email their FanDuel rep and say, hey, what's my, gross entries on the day? What's my net profit? And, their personal rep is pretty quick to help them out.
I'm still, I did get the 1099 this year. I have yet to get the DK rep reaching out to me. I'm ready for the box seat tickets on the Swolecast. I talk about how I want John Aguiar to take me out for sushi. I think it's time they start taking care of one of their whales, right, Peter?
Yeah, no, for sure. I'm surprised that nobody has reached out to the Deposit King himself.
I'm surprised too, buddy. I'm surprised. Let's see here. This was something we touched on at the top, but this was another question about this idea of offsetting, losses on, let's say, Underdog or FanDuel versus being a winning player on DraftKings. And just to add a different wrinkle to it, what about other gambling sites? Like, what if you're at the DK Sportsbook? Like, how does all that stuff work? Is it your job to kind of add all of those up across those sites?
Oh, absolutely. So ultimately it comes down to the taxpayer and, the records that they've kept. So one caveat is if you're treating your daily fantasy sports income as gambling, then you can only deduct gambling losses up to gambling income. So if you are assuming Schedule C treatment for your daily fantasy sports income and you're frequently going to, the casino and you have gambling income, well, at that point in time, you can't wash those two. You can't wash that together because you're assuming a trader business for your daily fantasy sports, but not for your poker or your casino winnings.
Yeah. So because that was another question about the poker stuff, and so it all has to do with if you are doing it as gambling miscellaneous, then that all falls into that bucket. However, if you're filing it as Schedule C, you're not claiming that you are a for-profit professional DFS player and a for-profit gambler. Could there be someone that was both of those?
Absolutely. There can be someone, but it's very rare. With the pandemic and with, the casinos being shut down, that's a little more tough to justify.
Gotcha.
With technology and the availability of the internet, it's nice because anyone can set a daily fantasy sports lineup, from the safety of their homes. But it's a little more tough to frequent the casino regularly and for profit. And so, in theory, if you are a professional poker player, and also if you are playing daily fantasy sports as a trader business, then yes, you can offset both of that income from, on your Schedule C trader business on two separate Schedule Cs. But, the average player that is treating their daily fantasy sports income as a trader business can't be washing their casino winnings or losses, from their daily fantasy sports income.
Right. Yeah. It's like if I file the Schedule C for being a for-profit DFS player this year, and then I go on a Vegas trip with buddies and blow $1,000 at the blackjack table, I can't write that $1,000 off of my DFS winnings.
Nope.
There you go.
But if you were treating your daily fantasy sports income as gambling, then by all means.
Then you could. So it's, and this then kind of dovetails back with the consistency issue, because the consistency, you could see people jumping back and forth, and why that becomes an issue.
Yep, you got it.
Look at this. I'm going to become a CPA by the end of this.
I think that you know a lot more than you're leading on, man.
By the end of this, I'm going to be a CPA, and you're going to be wearing purple wigs and hard hats doing content on Twitter.
Hey, man, I like it. I like it.
Here was another question I got from Josh Crons. He said, would it make sense to make a small business for all of my fantasy teams, co-owner teams, lots of platforms, etc., all consolidated? So now he's kind of branching out into the season-long fantasy space where people like me are playing on FFPC. You might have an $1,800 entry fee, have winnings there. How does that all come into play with this?
So I think once again, you really don't need to form a separate LLC to treat, fantasy team income as a trader business. If you believe that managing your fantasy teams is a trader business that is engaged for profit, your livelihood depends on it, you play regularly, you can sure make the case for business treatment. But once again, you don't need a separate LLC to take this position on your tax return.
Gotcha.
So.
And this question also kind of dovetailed with the other kind of speculation going on these days. People playing the stock market. And A Raven asked, can you write off short-term market losses versus 1099 income? I don't know if he was joking or not, but let's just answer in earnest.
Oh my gosh. I follow A Raven and he is quite the character. He's a really funny guy for sure. So indirectly, yes, you can deduct $3,000 in capital loss from the stock market with your ordinary income. So if you did have 1099 income, it's going to be included as income one way, shape, or form. So, if you did have, some stock market losses, you can offset up to $3,000 in loss indirectly from your 1099 daily fantasy sports income. Okay.
And so so we have the gambling miscellaneous income, we have the Schedule C. Where does stock market capital loss fall into that?
Oh, that's Schedule D on your capital gains and losses, but that might have to be
another show.
Yeah, that's Schedule D.
All right, let's do what everyone's been waiting for. We can close out with some of this talk. It's obviously taken over everyone's Twitter feeds. It's taken over my life. First of all, Pete, have you gotten in the Top Shot streets at all?
Oh yeah, I have dabbled in a little bit of Top Shot, and I'm a huge believer in NFTs in the future. I just can't, I guess, actively, monitor the marketplace. And to be honest, I've only realized a very, very small profit, maybe $2. So I've made maybe 10 cents an hour with all my hard work. And
I hate to say it, Pete, but you might have one of the worst ROIs I've heard of yet on the site.
I know, which makes me sad. I don't know how I'm the only. I'm just glad I don't have a loss. I'm gonna quit while I'm slightly ahead.
Yeah. So let's get to the whole kind of wet blanket thing with this situation. Is it incredibly frictionless to buy and sell on Top Shot? 100%. Almost too easy to do considering the potential tax implications. Roham, the CEO, has already come out and said they aren't going to be giving 1099s for this year. So why don't you give us kind of your take? I know you've read some of those threads. You have probably been thinking about this, getting questions. What kind of your take on how this might all play out for people who are going to be filing this stuff next year?
Sure. And I'm not gonna lie, all this Top Shot stuff is insane. It's crazy. Most of the questions that I've been getting recently have been Top Shot related, believe it or not. DraftKings and FanDuel issued out their 1099 forms, and all everyone wants to do is talk about Top Shot.
Yep.
And so, I'm gonna caveat what I have to say, with the fact that right now there isn't much guidance from the IRS at all. But to me, Top Shot taxation is totally dictated once again by intent and regularity or frequency of activity. So if you're buying a position and decide to sell it for a gain, for fun, then you can pretty much argue a collectibles tax rate. However, if you have sufficient activity and you intend to continue to profit, then you can once again classify that Top Shot income as a trader business. Which will allow you to deduct for all kinds of related business deductions. You're almost treating your moments as inventory at this time, and you're treating your Top Shot gains as a business, as almost a business operation. One caveat to above is, once again, the IRS ends up needing to they need to issue some guidance on this. If the IRS says Top Shots are some sort of cryptocurrency because it's on blockchain, well, at that point, it's treated more like a stock than it is as a collectible. As a prudent CPA, I would just advise everyone out there to keep accurate records, because for the time being, nobody knows how this is going to pan out, how the IRS is going to want a piece of the pie per se, and get some of that money, through tax.
Yeah, I think it's, I was talking about it today. It does seem weird. Like, you can interact and play DFS every day, and it's your profits in the aggregate for that year. That makes sense. It's just weird to me that you could day trade, Top Shot, and you buy a $10 moment and you sell it for 20, and every single time that's a taxable single event. It just doesn't seem like an efficient way to go about a frictionless marketplace like this.
Yeah, and I'm curious to see how everything pans out, because Top Shot, from my understanding, is a Canadian-based company.
Yeah, Dapper Labs is in Vancouver.
Yeah, there are going to be some tricky tax. There's going to be a tricky situation to navigate there with Dapper being Canadian.
If you say someone like me, basically what happened to me with Top Shot is I got in there and I just started spraying and praying. I then really started studying up. I got more of a strategy of things I wanted to hold long-term. And so I sold a lot of the stuff that I considered mistakes. And now I'm into all kinds of stuff that I want to hold for a long term and I don't even want to touch. I guess what I'm trying to get at here is saying to people is like that when in doubt, hold for longer periods of time, so you're not realizing taxable events with all these maybe lateral moves in certain instances.
Oh yeah, definitely. If Top Shot trades are treated as somewhat like stock, there is going to be a holding period per se, and it's going to have different tax implications based on how long you hold on to a certain moment before you sell it. But once again, there's no clear guidance issued by the IRS just yet. So I think we're just going to have to stay put and wait a little bit longer and see what the IRS says in terms of some of these insane Top Shot gains that I'm seeing across the market.
Yeah,
it's incredible. It's awesome.
Yeah, it's definitely a fun new space. I'm also curious. I'm sure it kind of applies to the other stuff, but do you have any other thoughts on just kind of NFTs in general? Obviously, there's all these other marketplaces, OpenSea. You can go buy stuff on Super Rare, all these places. I'm curious, are there any other kind of tax things people should have in the back of their head if they're investing in trading in these markets?
I think, once again, you just need to keep an accurate and detailed record of every single transaction that you make. There just isn't much out there right now issued by the IRS when it comes to the sale of some of these NFTs.
Okay, actually, one final question that is very near and dear to me.
Yes.
I famously bought 1/5 of a CryptoPunk. I believe we plan to hold it for a good amount of time. But just say we all decided we were going to sell. How does tax implications work for fractional investments?
You will most likely owe 1/5 of the tax due, my good man. And at the moment, that's all I can tell you.
Gotcha.
If you want to wash your hands of that tax liability, I'd happily, buy, half of that 1/5. So,
but then you would be assuming, and it'd be like tax implications all from this single punk.
Heck yeah, we'll navigate that situation together if it comes down to it. I'll order in a wig off of Amazon as well right now.
There you go. Well, Pete, I very much appreciate you coming by. This has been a show I've been wanting to do for a while. I think a lot of people are going to find it very informative. Like I said, you have your course up here, and I should actually get this course pulled up here just so people can kind of get the feel of what it looks like here. And then in the meantime, as I get this pulled up, are there any other plugs that you would like to make? Obviously, we got to follow you on Twitter at Daily Fantasy CPA. Are there any other services you offer? What if someone's like, Pete, I just want you to do my taxes?
we're just going to have to talk through it in the DMs. If anyone had any tax related questions, I'm more than happy to answer them in much more detail. I'd like to think that, I'm an interesting follow.
You're a legitimately good follow. I was skeptical when I went to hit the follow button. I was like, what are this CPA guy? You're a fun follow on Twitter.
Hey, I appreciate that. I've definitely gotten some interesting questions in the Twitter DMs, but I just want to urge any of your following, anybody watching this show, that I don't bite at the end of the day, and no question is too silly or too dumb.
Well,
so especially if it's quick, I don't mind answering them.
There you guys go.
Yeah.
So, yeah. Don't jeopardize too much of his time. There's a reason he created the course. One of my influencer perks, he gave me a free copy of the course, so I got to check it out. I can vouch for it. I'm going to be sending parts of it to my accountant to make his life easier. So the link is right down below in the show notes. You guys can get it. Tax planning around your daily fantasy sports winnings, $100, well worth it if you have a decent amount of winnings that you want to make sure you get filed correctly this year. Pete, we will see you in the Twitter streets. We will have to run this back again next year when we know exactly how all this Top Shot business is going to go down. How does that sound?
Sounds like a plan, my man. Looking forward to it.
All right, everyone. Thanks for tuning in. We will see you guys next time here on the Peter Overzet YouTube channel.